Okay, good day, everyone. Welcome to this International Women's Day panel discussion with Debating Africa. Debating Africa is an online platform that hosts debates with citizens, policymakers, experts, and influencers on key issues facing the continent. For today's discussion, we've partnered with our sister platform, Debating Europe, for a diversity of perspectives on the state of women's rights in Africa and Europe. We'll be hearing from our citizens panel, Mamonaheng from Lesotho, Cinzia from Italy, but based in Germany, and Elena from Macedonia. Welcome to you all. We are so thrilled to have you and look forward to what we hope will be an honest and engaging conversation. To kick things off, I'd like to invite you to offer a brief introduction and an answer to our first question of the day, which is, how have the rights of women evolved from the generation before you until now? In the interest of being a good host, I will begin. My name is Thandanani Mhlanga, but you may call me Tanda. I'm the editor of Debating Africa and a citizen of South Africa. From my perspective, to answer this question, I would say that I've seen the women in my family make amazing transitions from the home to the workspace, being able to accumulate assets, degrees, and a lot of advancement in their personal lives. But I would say that women in South Africa are always facing a constant threat of violence and harm. And even though we are freer and we have more democratic rights, this infringement on our ability to move around the country and to be safe is a step backwards in women's rights from my perspective. So I will ask Elena to begin by answering this first question, starting with an introduction.
So hi everyone, my name is Elena. I'm coming from Macedonia. Until 1945, they didn't have the right to vote, the women in our country, which then was part of Yugoslavia. Now I can say that we are so much involved and developed since then, but of course we still, as organizations, as women, we still have a big like we need to do a lot of things so we can be at least in some point equal with the men in our country.
Thank you. That's a very good point. I'll hand over to Cinzia for a different perspective. What would you say from your country?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. As you said before, I'm Italian and I'm based in Germany, so I'm happy maybe to also bring two perspectives in Europe. As you both said, Elena and you, it's true. We've also been seeing in both countries where I'm based a huge step forwards toward equality and toward being toward having the same rights as men, but especially on the paper, we still have a lot to do in terms of really reaching equality. As you mentioned, a big problem is violence. One woman is killed in Germany and in Italy. Actually, numbers are very similar every 3 days. So every 3 days, one woman is killed because of being a woman. So clearly, there's still a lot more that needs to be done. Other problems are for sure the distribution of care work. Care work in the families is mostly still on women's shoulders. As you said, though, yes, we have achieved a lot. So we can see how much we can grow. In the past, my grandmother she was not allowed to use a bicycle. And now I'm using my race bicycle. My race bicycle, then my mom, when I sent her very proudly my picture, she commented, "Oh, that looks very much masculine," which is like, come on, it's a bicycle. I'm very proud that I can use it. I can ride it. So every generation, I think, is going beyond in achieving something more, but we still need to do more. Still, as I was saying before, one problem is the care work. I have been asked way more times than my brothers to help clean at home, for example, to take care of little tasks at home. So the mentality, most of all, I think still it's something we have to work on, and to change the mentality, a push from politics and civil society and organization, I think it's important to be achieved. Thank you.
It's an amazing response. And it's so interesting, the parallels between Europe and Africa, because I grew up in an African family. And I know for a fact there are a lot of gendered roles. Even though we are progressive and a lot of people are educated in the family, there's still a very clear separation between women's work and men's work. Mamonaheng, can you give us a perspective from Lesotho, please, after your introduction?
Thank you for having me. I'm Mamonaheng, I'm the founder of Impact School. Now, from my perspective, I would say in Lesotho, it's a little bit strange because by default, women tend to go to school more than men because men end up heading cows, so they end up becoming head boys. So we have more women who go to school, but you find out that later on, if you go to the big corporations, you still have men in higher positions, ranking positions, even if that's the situation. So I'll still say we have a lot of work to do. And adding on to what Cinzia said, I'm the only girl, 2 older brothers, and same situation. I used to do most of the housework, wash the dishes and stuff like that. So I think we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot that needs to be done.
Thank you for that perspective. I couldn't agree more. Elena, I know you had one more point you wanted to add. Would you like to go ahead briefly?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just forgot to say a very important thing. From starting the pandemic, we went 3 steps backwards, actually. There was like a lot of women like poverty and issues because of the workplaces that didn't allow, for example, the kindergartens don't work, so the woman can't go to work, and that was the biggest issue because they needed to leave work. And now for the 8th of March, we have a protest called Poverty Has a Female Face, because it really is the biggest problem that we are facing during the pandemic as a country. So yeah, that was my other point. And also that Cinzia reminded me, in Macedonia, the last 2 years, there was like, I think 10 to 15 femicides, like women killed just because they're women. And Macedonia is a country with 2 million people. We are not a big country. So that is a huge number for less than a 1.5 year. And it's devastating, really.
Thank you for that perspective. And it's interesting that we come from such different countries, but a lot of these issues overlap. COVID has disproportionately affected women across the board. And it's very interesting that this is the same no matter how advanced, so-called advanced the society is. We've spoken a bit about women's rights, and I just want to hop over to the issue of the gender pay gap. Many insist that there are structural barriers to women's career development, while a lot of people will actually tell you that it doesn't exist and women just need to be more assertive at the negotiating table to ask for better salaries. Do you believe that the gender pay gap exists? And other examples of it that you can share? I'm going to start this one with Mamonaheng. Let's head over to you.
Okay. Actually, I believe it does exist because, like I said, most high-ranking positions are held by men in my country, and those would be very high-paying positions. So I think in that way, yes, men are given positions that pay well. And even though in Lesotho we've started seeing a lot of women going into parliament and occupying those spaces, so I'd say it is an improvement. And I think we are getting somewhere because we've also started having those kind of conversations here in Lesotho. And we're having them a lot. So I think that we're starting to see the results, even though we're getting there little by little. But majority of the positions and everything that they're occupied by men.
Cinzia, is the situation the same in Germany?
Very similar again. In fact, it's interesting to be here sitting together and hearing, as you mentioned before, we're in such different, so far away in terms of kilometers, but the challenges that we're facing are very similar. Yes, we do have the gender pay gap also in both countries, in Italy and Germany, and I can say overall in Europe is very, very strong. This is because women, even though, as it was also mentioned before, we go more often to school, in universities as well, but still outside, something happens after school where we get less paid job, less secure positions, and this is something that exacerbates a little bit after marriage. That then something we mentioned as well before with care, it's mostly the women that are staying home to take care of the family. In Italy, I think only 50% of women are actually 56% of women are working. So almost half of the women population is actually out of work. On the other hand, it's much better the situation in Germany. We have over 75% of women working. Half of them, though, are working half-time, which also then contributes to create more of a gender pay gap. In Germany, there's also, since the 50s, there is this, it's called spouse splitting system for taxes. So once you're married, basically the family is considered as one. So as one, you pay the taxes instead of having both spouses contribute equally. That in the short term, like in the moment when the love is strong, this is good because that means there are some tax deduction for the family as such. That means basically the person who earns the less is taxed more heavily than the person who earns more, in order to facilitate the family initially. That means often it's the women, as we said, that is earning less money. If they split in the future, if they want to separate, if they divorce, the women will have had contribute way less to the tax system in the long term, so that she will actually receive way less of a pension, for example. So that brings women in a position in which it can become very hard to divorce or separate if needed.
Thank you for that very in-depth breakdown of how something that's implemented at a structural level, probably well-intentioned by policymakers, in effect, can disadvantage women. We need to be factoring gender even at a policymaking level. Elena, I want to bring you in. Please go ahead.
Yes, of course, in Macedonia exists also, and I think that it's like really common thing, even when in most of the companies, the first question they ask when woman is on interview, if she's planning to start a family soon, or if she's planning to get married soon, which is unacceptable by law, but they still do it. So also, because I study marketing, I can say that there is a thing called a pink tax, which is that every product that is for women, which is pink, it's more expensive than the same product which is for men and it's not pink. So exactly, and that's my example, and currently that's happening. But also I can say that more and more women encourage themselves to get some really big positions in political life. For example, there is the first time in Macedonia that there is 77 men and 43 women in the parliament. So that's a big step, because before that was 2, then 10, then 12, and now it's 43. So it's a big step forward.
Thank you so much, Elena. And I'm actually going to ask you again the next question. I'm going to ask you to start. Do you feel empowered to push back against these narratives at work, whether you or even at home? Do you feel empowered to negotiate for strong salaries? And at home, do you feel empowered to negotiate for an equitable distribution of labor?
For me, yes, I think I am that kind of person, but I can't say that for everyone that lives here. The women are not that encouraged to work, to find better jobs, or to work something that is more paid, or to have bigger positions. For example, I used to work in NGO which is for single parents, single moms to be exact, and they when a company called us, or they always offered so low paying positions that I don't know, like they knew that they were women who, like woman which is alone with children's, and they offered the most worst, like the worst thing you can imagine for a work position, and then the lowest salary in the same time. So, and they were educated women, like it's not that they didn't have some university degree or something like that, but they just think that if they're women and single parents, they don't know anything. They're like, yeah.
Mamonaheng, I don't know if you have a perspective that's similar from Lesotho.
From my point of view, like I said, I'm the only girl and two brothers. Actually, I spent most of my teenage years in Europe, so I only came back home in 2017. So there's been a lot of challenging situations from actually at home and even at workplaces, in the sense that some things, when you try to negotiate, it's like you're bringing certain cultures within our culture. So it makes it a little bit challenging with me. But I've had conversations like that, even at home with my parents, where because in Lesotho, for example, being the only girl, should my parents pass away and my two brothers, and there's no will that's written, I wouldn't inherit anything. My uncle would. And yeah, I wouldn't inherit anything. My uncle would. So those are the kind of conversations that we're starting to have in Lesotho. And we also had one big, I would say, a case that was put forward by one of the princesses, because we're a kingdom, a monarchy, where she wanted to inherit, take over, because she was the only girl. And she actually lost the case. So it's really, really challenging. And a friend of mine, her mom passed away, it's 6 months back. She's the oldest, she's the daughter, the oldest, with two younger brothers. When she went to the banks and stuff, she was told that we can't help you if you're not with any of your siblings, or you need to come with a letter from the lawyers signed by your brothers that they give you permission to come and sort these things out. So those kind of things, we're having conversations like that. I am, and but it's still a struggle.
Wow. It's funny because it's not just about attitudes. If it was about attitudes, it wouldn't even need conversation. It's about structural barriers, actual structures that are put in place that make women's lives more difficult, but also, steal our assets and make it difficult for us to acquire generational wealth. Cinzia, can I get a perspective from you, please?
Yeah, and on the one hand, I would also argue against what you just said, because the problem, it is left to the individual, like to his or her, well, her own actually capacity to negotiate them. And this is people who are not so strong, people who are not able to negotiate, and are always going to be the losers. And this is probably also because often it's education. Well, this is something we read often, I suppose, that women are educated to be more polite, more less strong. We are less confident often. So maybe this is also why one of the reasons, if we are in the pay gender, if there is such a pay gender gap, which is, so do I feel empowered in in changing it. No, I don't, because as long as it is left to me as an individual, and as an individual, I don't feel strong enough. Unfortunately, I don't feel empowered. There are some measures that are extremely important. I know that one of the arguments is to increase transparency, and I absolutely believe, because I know, for example, in Germany is very private to speak about money. So you don't know what other people around you are earning. So you don't even know that maybe your colleagues, your male colleagues, are earning more. And then so of course you cannot even ask as long as you don't know, right? Because who would ever think that the person who's sitting next to you maybe earns more doing the same kind of task, which happens as well, is one form of gender gap that even exists, pay gap that even exists. So we do need measures, more transparency, maybe a better education as well. Why not? Including pushes to but also this should come also from the employers. I suppose they should also be more fair, and I think also that shows that for in the public sector, for example, there's way less pay gap between the genders because of more transparency, I suppose. And pink quotas, this is something I grew up thinking we don't need pink quotas in politics. Why? If I want to do something, I just do it. But then you grow up and you see it's not really like this. So we do need pink quotas, because we are not put in the same situation as men to participate, to be part of the representatives. So a little push by politics is needed for sure.
Thank you. And I actually want to go back to a point you made at the beginning. Do we have a responsibility as women to be negotiating better? You know, there are structural challenges for sure, but what can we do as a group, as a class, to improve our lived and career conditions? Go to Elena before we move on.
Yes, as women, we can do much more if we are together in this, of course, and if we support each other, because when they understand that we deserve it, and we really do deserve that kind of money or that position, but first we need to start with our law, with our institutions, with our government, which is like to start encouraging each other to do some activities that will help our government to understand the need to that women are actually equal to men. I think that this is maybe the biggest problem in my country, starting from the government, that they need to pay more attention to things like this. But we're developing. We are a young country and we are developing, and how I like how the politicians more and more are interested in this kind of campaigns, in this kind of handling the situation between this gap. So yeah, I think we are evolving in this part, but still as a woman we can do so much more, and I encourage the young woman to participate in NGO sector, to study, to learn, so they cannot be blinded about what is the right and what they can do. They can do everything that they want to do. So I just encourage them to study, to learn, to catch every opportunity they have, so later in their life they could actually know what is their right and actually say, this is my right, I must have it. And I think that we need to start from there, from the young girls, young women, and then we will have better society for the future and for our children. And
thank you. I like that. I must have it. I think that's a good mantra for any woman. Mamonaheng, would you like to? I know that there's a cultural element to this as well. I mean, we're talking about like unpacking mindsets and tackling a lot of traditional norms. What do you have to say about what African women can do?
I think we do have a And I think it would be easier to start off in our homes. Once we start making those changes at home, then make it, because if we are waiting for the do that, we have to realize that already up there we men, I think in most cases, and it wouldn't make it at home if you start making those changes. I think we'll get somewhere. Yeah. So I would say if we start at home.
Thank you. Very succinct answer. Okay, so I have a final one for you guys. I'm very interested to hear from the panel whether you think motherhood affects women's careers. I know that for my friends, we at that age where we are deciding these things and we're talking about it, and some of my friends, and to some extent myself, I don't know how it would impact my career. Like, we don't know whether we can even afford to make that decision, and whether one can take 3 years off to raise a child and come back and still have the same trajectory. I will start with Cinzia. How do you feel about the penalty that women face when they choose to start families?
Yeah, big issue. Definitely also in my life and circle of friends. Definitely becoming a mother affects greatly your career path. In Germany, there's a paternity leave, which is, I think, now everywhere in Europe, but some countries use it more and some countries use it less. And I can see my German friends are, for example, using it a lot. The fact that the father can take, I think it can be divided 6 months and 6 months or something like this. So some such measures that obliges also the fathers to get more involved, to lose as much time as possible, as well as the woman, so to say, from the job, from being on the job market, that can really make an impact. Kindergartens as well, like nurseries, they should be available for every family who decides to have kids, because indeed, if you take 6 months of your career off, or if you take 3 or 4 years, it makes a big difference. Also in terms, if we think how technology moves fast, if you're out of the world kind of for 3 months or for 3 years, then it's very difficult to catch up. So definitely we need more kindergartens and nurseries everywhere, and definitely also measures that allow fathers to be involved as much as mothers in the growing of the family. And on the other hand, if we think about it, children, they don't come just from the woman. We always need two. So we should make families that are supported by both parents in the long term as well, not only in the very making of it.
Such an incredible point. And hopefully once we start doing that, we'll stop saying men are babysitting their own children. You don't babysit your own kid. Mamonaheng, let me get a perspective from Lesotho. Women, motherhood, career. What are the impacts on women's lives?
I think it definitely affects the careers, but then in Lesotho, I think it would be similar to South Africa. It's very, comparing it with Europe, it's very normal to have a nanny. It's not so expensive, actually, having a nanny, even though to have a nanny or a house helper, you'd still be taking a woman who's supposed to be, or a young woman who's supposed to be developing her career. So it's still going to affect another woman for you to be able to be growing career-wise. So it's very different, because having lived in Europe for many years, I know one of my friends, her mom had to actually stop working. She was a teacher, gave birth to 3 of her kids, and went back. I think maybe my friend told me that 10 years later, that's when the mother went back. But here, in Lesotho, and I think other neighboring countries, it's easy to have a nanny, a helper, for a very low pay now. That's why I'm saying it's still affecting, another woman. So it's a little bit, it's tricky, challenging, and complex. Yeah.
Thank you for touching on that, the intersections between gender and class, because as women, we can also feed into these systems of inequality. A woman, a low income, a woman from a low income background having to fill the gap where you can't. It's a conversation to be had for sure. Last answer, Elena, please let us know from your perspective what you think.
Yeah, I actually needed to do a research about this question because I mean I was constantly in contact with women, and I know that the biggest problem and issue in our country about motherhood is that they have only 9 months after they give birth. They only have 9 months to be at home with the baby. I think that in every other country it's more than 9 months. They had 12 months and now it's 9, which is worse than before. So a lot of women, actually 9-month babies are really small to go to kindergarten. So they leave it with the grandparents, with family friends or best friends, or nanny eventually, but if they have like bigger salary or something like that. But a lot of exactly what happened, I mentioned it before, because I worked with single moms. They in the most of the cases they didn't have anyone to leave the baby with, so they needed to stop working to stay with the baby. So that was a really big issue, and I felt so worried about that. And we, as a woman, tried to support them, but still, that's a big issue which is needed to be solved by the government. So that's why we recommended they can build like center for this kind of cases when the mom is under some. They will give help to the mom, like she's not left alone without any money. She will have like support from the government and stuff like that. That was our recommendation to the government. So actually we started working on that kind of center, so we can develop it to something which is there to support the woman. But yeah, that's the biggest issues. I think that it's 9 months is too, like, it's not enough time for mom to stay with the baby. I think that's the biggest issue with motherhood and career in our country.
It's a very, very valid point. Thank you so much. I know I'm being a bit indulgent here. We are actually out of time, but I really would like to give you guys an opportunity to very briefly let us know what kind of legacy would you like to hand over to the next generation in terms of women's rights? What kind of world, what kind of Lesotho, Germany, Italy, Macedonia would you like to hand over to women of the next generation?
Okay, should I start?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and this is something I was just thinking now, that the challenge that we are facing in our generation of feminists, if I can call all of ourselves with this, well, in general, feminists, we are fighting with the problem that we cannot have it all. Like we have won, our mothers have won the big request of feminism of 20-40 years ago, which was we want a career. We got the career with still some challenges as we've seen, but we made some good movements forward. The problem is that now we have it all in terms of, as we have the career and we have the family, and this is not sustainable. We cannot be the perfect mothers with a perfect career, very happy children, and even happy husbands. This is impossible. So we need the big challenge, and what we want to give to the next generation is to, for sure, having feminist men. That is something we're working on, I think. We need to have discussions that include more people. We need to have more intersectional feminism as well, making sure that we are also talking with migrant women, refugees women, disabled men as well. So to have a better, more inclusive kind of path forwards toward families that are able to share the burden, that can both having a career and having a family, taking care of family, let alone disabled children, for example. So these are all, we need to find keys to make this burden not being only on women, but to be shared by all the members of the family might have. Thank you.
That was beautifully stated. Mamonaheng, any final words?
Okay, adding on to what Cynthia said, I think I support the more sharing of duties and responsibilities. So that's something that I'm really supportive of, and I would like to make an impact within that area, or in the yeah.
Thank you. I love your answers, very to the point. Elena?
Yes, I could say that we as a woman of this generation are establishing new practices in the female solidarity in this world. So I think that we are more and more conscious of what's happening about us, about other women, about us, about everyone. And I think the last thing I will say is that now we are running so the generation after us can walk this path. So that's it from me.
Thank you. I just remembered how much I love talking to women, like to groups of women. I've missed it because we've all been cooped up in our homes. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Needless to say, we could spend hours on this topic, though we've covered a lot of ground today, and I've loved hearing perspectives from your respective countries. Please feel free to join the discussion on Debating Africa via this URL at the bottom of the screen. We're looking for a diversity of perspectives from everyday citizens, men and women, on the state of women's rights today, or any other topic really. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we'll be hosting a lot more. Until then, goodbye to you and to our amazing panel. Thank you.